Animal Crossing is a game which needs little to no introduction. Most people I know have played it in some capacity and have some kind of nostalgic memory associated with the game. With the calm, low-stakes gameplay, the cute, colourful graphics, the varied cast of characters, and the iconic soundtrack, there's a lot about this game that just feels really well crafted. But few games get to this level of notoriety without a little bit of experimentation, and Animal Crossing is no different. Throughout its life, Animal Crossing has been slowly redesigning, altering, and cutting parts of its content as the franchise develops, which has left us with a pretty big library of lost and forgotten content to explore. Now, when it comes to Animal Crossing, there's actually a few different types of lost and forgotten content for us to explore. First is the early development content. These are assets created at the very start of the franchise's life, before many of the gameplay elements had been fully established and they remain unused. Then we have assets which have appeared in the game at one point, but have been cut from later releases or altered during localization and are no longer available. And finally, we have calendar-specific content. This one refers to the fact that Animal Crossing is a game which runs on a real-world calendar, holding events and promotions between specific real-world days. This means that once these calendar dates have passed, there's often no way to get these promotional items again, making them their own little form of lost content. And today, we'll be exploring a little bit of everything. So let's start off with exploring some of the very early design assets that didn't end up making it into the final game. Now, when Animal Crossing started its life, it was actually intended to be a dungeon crawler style game, before it evolved into a life simulator. And some people theorise that that's actually the reason that the characters in the first game wear these little Viking-like helmets, that it's a little nod or tribute to that. That's not officially confirmed, but it's just a theory that I think is cute. It actually sounds like the original concept resembled something a lot more like Pokemon, since the developers mentioned in an interview that the original plan for the game was to have each animal having different powers that the player could utilise to progress. So the game clearly went through a bit of evolution before it got to the Animal Crossing we have today, and we can see that in some of these early assets that were found in the infamous Nintendo data leak of 2020. First of all, we have some early designs for icons which appear in the game. None of these are actually too different to what appears in the final game, but they're interesting to see nonetheless. That being said, we do actually have a few designs for items that never ended up making it into the final game. And just to clarify, in this section, when I'm talking about the final game, I'm talking about the very first edition of Animal Crossing that was ever released, which is also known as Jibutsu no Mori. So that's what I'm talking about for this bit. This game did get some localization changes and general updates before it saw a worldwide release. So for this bit, we're just talking about the very first original game that was released only in Japan. The first of these lost icons are designs for a CD and a guitar item, which were likely intended to be lost items rather than anything actually interactable, as we can see that the code for these two items was reused for a handkerchief and a camera item respectively. We also have this item called Pet, which people theorise was intended to be a trash item similar to the tyre or the boot. This is because obviously it looks like an empty water bottle, and it's also suggested that PET refers to polyethylene terephthalate, as in the plastic. We then have icons for a seed, a seedling, and a potted plant, but we don't really have any more information on these about what they were or what they became in the final game. And finally, we have the sickle, which was seemingly intended to be a tool akin to the fishing rod or the net. This item actually still exists within the game file and can be accessed through a little bit of hacking, but I believe it just comes up with the name sickle, while the actual item is represented by either the net or the toolbox. And potentially most interesting out of all these, we have the nuts icon. The code for this icon was reused for cherries in the final game, meaning that at one point, nuts were going to be a possibility for a town fruit. Presumably it was going to be chestnuts based on the design in the icon here, but this is just super interesting. Imagine if we had towns with chestnuts and not cherries. That would be so weird. We also have some sprite designs for dropped items, so what your item would look like when you drop it on the floor. But none of these are too crazy. Most of them are pretty similar to the final design we got. The only notable ones are the letter sprites, since in the final game there's actually no option to drop a letter, and the icon labelled floor, because this icon graphic was actually later reused as the map icon. We then have 53 unused clothing designs to explore, actually technically 55 if you count the 2 that were featured in the original showcase video which don't appear in the final game. It's really cool to see these unused designs in general, but one of the most interesting parts is that a lot of the designs actually reference other parts of pop culture. Among the designs, we have shirts referencing Mobile Suit Gundam, Neon Genesis Evangelion, the Hanshin Tigers baseball team, Japanese rock band X Japan, and of course, Link's tunic from Legend of Zelda. Then we have probably the most interesting area to explore, the lost characters. There's actually only one villager who is created in the files but never made it into the final game, and that character is known as Cat 13. She's a dark brown cat character with blue inner ears, big ginger eyebrows and a curl of ginger hair, as well as some very luscious pink lips. And she's paired it all with the beatnik shirt, which does appear in the final game. And we don't know anything else about this character. We don't know her name, we don't know what her personality's like, we don't know any more details about her. All we know is that she is clearly diva. There are a few screenshots floating around of her appearing in the game under the name Catty, but these are all modded characters and Catty is just a fan-made name that's been given to her. Although she does bear a lot of similarities to the character Cat that was introduced in New Leaf, so I do wonder if Cat was meant to be a bit of an homage to this lost character. There's also evidence of another unused character in the files called BEA3, but that is literally all we know of this character. We don't have any visuals, we don't have any names, we don't have anything else. All we know is that this character kind of existed at one point. The only thing we can really assume about this character is that they were intended to be a bear, just because people theorise that BEA stands for bear. But there are 3 more unused characters for us to explore, and these ones are very interesting because they are humans. That's right, we have character models for 2 human soldier characters and a human woman character, who even has her own walk cycle. And this is obviously super interesting because there have never been human NPCs in an Animal Crossing game, and the style of these characters looks totally different to the human player character that we have. For the 2 soldier models, it looks like there was a bit of experimentation going on here, since one model has a bit more of a realistic face while the other one's a bit more simplistic and cartoony. But it's pretty obvious that these 2 characters were eventually replaced in the final game with Copper and Booker, the dog soldiers. That's not something that's confirmed, but the uniform is similar and they even parallel the dog characters in there being one tall one and one short one, so it's just kind of assumed that that's how these characters evolved. We then have the woman, seemingly an older character with ginger hair and big red lips, wearing a pink dress, a yellow and green apron and green sandals. She also has her arm held out in a bit of an awkward way, which might imply that she was intended to be carrying something. So the name of this character model is actually called Oba, which is thought to be a reference to the Japanese word for ant. And there is actually one other character in Animal Crossing who's referred to as Obaba during development, Joan the turnip seller. And because of this, it's generally theorised that this character is essentially an early version of Joan. And this would actually make sense with her character model having the outstretched arm, seemingly to carry something, perhaps a basket of turnips. So this was a super interesting discovery, finding out that there were at one point going to be human NPCs in Animal Crossing, which I never knew about. Okay, there's also XSQ. To be honest, this is a character which I find kind of really hard to explain, but I'm going to do my best to tell you who she is and what she's all about. She's also not a she, she's genderless, but I'm just gonna, I've assigned her female at video essay. So XSQ is a bright red squirrel character with blue eyes and a simple green dress. And we don't have an official name for this character, but we do have a lot of theorised names and fan names, including Chestnut, Shaki, Blazel, Jambette, Crisp, and more. Like Catty, she's a character who appears in the source code but not in the final game, and there's a little bit of speculation on what her role was actually intended to be in the game. Her internal ID is XSQ, which follows the patterns generally used in the game by special characters, such as Rover, who is XCT. So because of that, it's theorised that she was actually going to be a special NPC rather than a regular villager. But some people actually believe that XSQ was never intended to be a character in the final game at all, and that she was rather a test character. This is because XSQ can technically be imported into the game through some method that is just far too complex for me to even begin understanding. And if she's imported into the game, she'll use either Porter or Capin's dialogue, suggesting that she was used to test these functionalities. This theory makes sense to me also just because of her character design. Her really obnoxious yet simplistic design doesn't really fit with the general Animal Crossing character design, and to me, these kind of bright colours scream easily identifiable test character. But as I said, nothing is officially confirmed about this character. Basically everything we know is just theorised and speculation. And finally, we have the assets that were created but not used in the final game, but they did actually come around and get used in a later edition of the game. And the biggest example of this is probably the museum. Although it was quickly implemented from the game Debutsu no Mori Plus onwards, the original Japanese release didn't feature the museum. But despite this, we have models for multiple areas of the museum in the original game files, which look pretty identical to what eventually became the first version of the museum. But what doesn't look identical to the version we eventually got is the Blathers model. Yes, along with an early design for the museum, we have an early design for Blathers, which looks so unbelievably cute. His actual design is very similar, but his face and general aura is just a lot more cute and younger looking. He looks a lot more like Celeste. And we have another early design for a character who was initially scrapped but eventually brought back, Wisp the Ghost. The main difference here is the facial expressions and also the fact that his silly little hat looks even goofier than normal in this very first version. We also have this early icon for Medicine, which was not featured in the original game, and it looks totally different to the Medicine we eventually got. The early design's more like a potion bottle, as opposed to the kind of packet-like design we have now. Now that is pretty much all the unused content from the very first game in the Animal Crossing series, but we do have a little bit of unused content from games later in the series. Starting with the international release of Animal Crossing. There are 8 unused clothing items in this game, many of which are themed on kimonos or traditional Japanese dress. These were likely removed as part of the localization process, as I believe a lot of them were associated with specific Japanese traditions. For example, villagers would wear the traditional kimonos on New Year's Day. And it does make sense that these would be removed for an international release, but losing content will always be a shame. Interestingly though, the plum kimono actually does still appear in the game. It appears as decor in the houses of Monique and Chrissy, but it's not wearable or purchasable, so it's still lost. We also have this unused ghost chair, which there's nothing else to say about it, but I just love this design. I can't believe it wasn't used. And interestingly, one of the test maps in this game includes this mural-like feature. This one is very much an unknown. We don't know if murals were an actual game feature that was being trialed, or if this was just kind of a way for developers to test out textures, but this is a potentially interesting feature. In terms of lost content, New Leaf is kind of a really boring one. Pretty much the only piece of content that didn't make it into the final game is this blue Argyle tank, and that's it. But the New Leaf era did give us this very interesting visual. From the developer roundtable, we got this map of what the wider Animal Crossing village looks like, which doesn't really tell us anything new or interesting, but it's just really cool to see your village from this angle. Perspective format. And then we have New Horizons, which is a very difficult one to cover in terms of lost and forgotten content. Because of its frequent updates, it's really hard to classify what's truly lost and forgotten in New Horizons, so this is generally the game I'll be mentioning the least in this video. So for our next area of forgotten content, we're going to be covering content that has appeared in the game at some point, but has been changed or removed at a later date. Something to mention here is that Animal Crossing games will always add more content than they remove, and it's also not uncommon for a previously cut game element to resurface in a later release of the game. So I'll be trying my best in this section to just focus on the content that has truly lost and has not been brought back as of right now. So let's start with the big one, characters. Now, New Horizons actually brought back a ton of characters which hadn't been seen in the franchise for a while, but we still have a cast of villagers who haven't been seen in the game since the early releases. Some of my favourite villagers who only appear in the early games are Analog the Penguin, Carrot the Cow, Sunny the Frog, Iggy the Goat, Madame Rosa the Bird, Megumi the Dog, Patricia the Rhino, Poho the Bear, Woolio the Sheep, and my absolute favourite, Nosegay the Aardvark. I love Nosegay, she's so cute. We don't really have any official explanation for why these villagers in specific were removed, but for some of them it's theorised that it's to do with some of their cultural theming. For example, some of the cut characters include Alina the Elephant, who has heavy Indian theming, and Quetzal the Eagle, who is seemingly Native American inspired. Like I say, this isn't an official connection, it's just kind of a theorised reason for some of these characters being removed, but we do know of one character who was canonically redesigned due to potential cultural badness. Negative cultural implications is what I wrote. And that character is Jane the Gorilla, who is also a character who only appears in some of the earlier games. She mainly appears as this pink and purple gorilla, but this is an alteration from her very first design, which featured brown skin, pink lips, and white hair, which doesn't look great. I think this is similar to the Jinx situation where she was meant to be kind of a representation of Gyaru makeup, but unfortunately it didn't translate very well and her design was quickly changed for the international release. But then she still got cut anyway because she was still quite ugly. And we actually do have one more lost character to discuss from a little bit later in Animal Crossing's life. Frillard. This guy is a special NPC who only appears in City Folk, and since this is the least popular game in the series, he remains pretty unknown. So Frillard, sometimes known as Master Frillard, is a frilled lizard, and his character is described to be Dr. Shrunk's teacher or master of sorts. In terms of gameplay, he performs pretty much the same role as Dr. Shrunk, teaching the player new emotions different from those that Shrunk teaches you. And while City Folk is the only game that Frillard officially appears in, Dr. Shrunk does make reference to him or an unnamed master in some lines of dialogue in some later games. But now let's move on to the bugs and fish that have been lost. The first fish to be removed from the original Animal Crossing was the Herabuna. Is that a real fish? I've never heard of that. Which was replaced by the brook trout in the international release. But the brook trout was removed in Wild World along with the large bass, the catfish and the small bass. We then don't get any more removals in City Folk or New Leaf, and the only change is that jellyfish are no longer a catchable fish and are instead hazards in the diving section. But we then got 3 final removals in New Horizons: the barbell steed, the eel and the rainbow trout. New Horizons did also remove a few of the sea creatures as well, the clam, the earshell and the horsehair crab, so these creatures now only exist in New Leaf. And now let's talk about bugs. There are actually quite a few bugs which were removed from the game during Wild World, so only appear in the very early games, and these were the common dragonfly, the coconut crab, the mountain beetle, the pine cricket, the drone beetle and the purple butterfly. In City Folk, the stag beetle was removed and the cockroach was no longer a catchable bug, but was instead something that would appear in your house if you didn't play for a long time. Nothing was cut in New Leaf, but when New Horizons came out, the house centipede, the oak silk moth, the lanternfly and the petal-tailed dragonfly were removed. But as a special treat, 2 previously cut bugs did return in this game: the drone beetle and the purple butterfly, renamed to the Great Purple Emperor. And now let's cover some items lost in localization, or simply altered rather than being completely removed. The first one is this letter paper known as the Danger Paper. I believe this is the only paper which doesn't appear in the worldwide release. It features in the original game but is replaced by the orange paper in the Animal Crossing worldwide release. I assume this is because of the Japanese text on the design, but interestingly this design did actually get a Chinese version for the Chinese port of the game. And the most infamous example of a changed design is probably the tomato juice shirt. I believe the designers did know what they were doing with this shirt and called it the tomato juice shirt as a joke, but they eventually changed it anyway because look at it. It was replaced with the fishbone top, which I really love and would unironically wear in real life. Other shirts which got changed include the 3 Arc shirt, which people theorise was changed due to it resembling Charlie Brown's shirt, which got replaced with the Fortune shirt, a shirt which again I would wear in a heartbeat. We also have the W shirt, presumably changed because of its resemblance to the clown, which became this classy houndstooth shirt. The puzzling shirt had a slight colour alteration, presumably to make it resemble a Rubik's Cube a little bit less. And the iHeart64 and iHeart GC shirts were changed to a cute cherry shirt. Again, a glow up. This one is believed was done due to concerns about it infringing on the iHeart NYC trademark. A couple of other interesting design changes include the school table, the garbage can, the mailbox, the work sign, the traffic cone and the bell shrine, all of which were changed to resemble a more Western version of these items for the international release. This was done to quite a few items, and my favourite example of this is this tiny miniature car item where they actually changed the side of the steering wheel for the international release. This one is so funny because I can't imagine anyone noticing this tiny detail, so it's really kind of cute and wholesome that they went to the trouble to do that anyway. And now let's spend a minute talking about gameplay features which no longer exist in the final game. One of these is tanning, a feature which is present in all games up until New Horizons. In any of these games, if you spend long enough walking around your island in the sun, your skin will eventually develop a darker tanned complexion. And if you don't want to tan, you can use a parasol or an umbrella to avoid it. But this mechanic was scrapped in New Horizons since this game was the first to feature customizable skin colours for your character. This is likely going to be the game standard now, so I think it's quite unlikely that we're going to get the tanning mechanism back, but that is a small price to pay for increased character diversity, so I think we're all good on that front. Another game feature which only appears in New Leaf is the stump designs. In New Leaf, if you cut down a tree with the axe, there's a chance that one of 12 patterns will appear in the stump. These stump designs are super cute, and I don't really know why they were removed. The only reason I can think of is maybe they were encouraging people to cut down too many trees, but I don't know. And finally, a super cool game element that was only available in Wild World and City Folk was the UFO. This UFO would occasionally fly over your town and could be shot down in the same way that balloons can be shot down. It would land in your town with Gulliver lying next to it, who would ask you to find missing ship parts around the island, after which he would reward you with a rare piece of furniture. This is the kind of feature that would be so exciting to stumble across as a kid. I don't think I ever knew about this, and I can imagine me and my brother absolutely freaking out if we discovered this when we were younger. And for our last section, let's go over some seasonal items which are now technically lost. As I explained before, certain promotional events would take place over real-world time periods, after which these items could not be received again. There are a couple of workarounds for this, since once the item is given to a player, that player is then able to purchase that item again in Tom Nook's shop. But for all intents and purposes, we're saying that these are lost because you can't get them again unless you got them in the first place. Or maybe you could visit someone's town if you're sneaky. Many of these items would be sent to a player in the mail from Nintendo themselves in order to promote an upcoming Nintendo product. For example, the Pikmin hat, the DSi bench, the Nintendo Wii locker, and these slightly too realistic Nintendogs models. Other items were given out to celebrate national days, for example, a model bus for Teachers' Day, a hot dog hat for Independence Day, the fedora chair for National Hat Day, and the shopping cart for Black Friday. Japan also got some of their own time-exclusive items, such as the Empress Tiara, the student outfit, the ghost umbrella, and of course, the eggplant cow and the cucumber horse. Most of these remained exclusive to Japan as they were to celebrate holidays that were very unique to Japan, for example, Boys' Day, Girls' Day, Children's Day, and the start of the rainy season. And finally, there are a couple of special villages that only appeared in Animal Crossing for very brief moments in time. First are the Legend of Zelda characters, introduced and only appearing in New Leaf Welcome Amiibo. Wolf Link, Medley, Epona, and Ganon. I'm such a Zelda girl, so these are some of my favourite characters. I like these ones a lot. These specific characters did not reappear in New Horizons, however we did get two more Zelda characters in this game, Mineru and Tulin. And a similar situation happened with Splatoon characters, where we got Cece, Vishay, and Inkwell added in New Leaf Welcome Amiibo. However, Inkwell is the only character that didn't return again in New Horizons. And while these characters are no longer available in the game, obviously Nintendo owns the rights to all these characters, so it's possible that they could return at some point. And there's also Feline, a character who only features in New Leaf Welcome Amiibo to promote the Monster Hunter series. But there are more characters lost to time who we haven't mentioned yet. First are Holden and Philly, two characters introduced in New Leaf Welcome Amiibo as promotional tie-in characters. Philly is a yellow horse character to promote the brand 7-Eleven, and therefore wears a 7-Eleven uniform and has her whole RV kitted out to look like a 7-Eleven. She's one of the few characters that can't be invited to move into a player's town, and it seems the only way to invite her to your campsite was to do so via the Wi-Fi option at participating 7-Eleven locations during some set dates. The other brand collaboration character was Holden, a red and yellow hamster character created in collaboration with Fueki, a Japanese company notable for their glue and stationery products. His design is based off the company mascot, Fueki-kun. For interesting, Fueki-kun is actually a dog, so I don't really know why they went for a hamster for this. Again, Holden is a character who only appeared at the campsite during a specific time period and could not be asked to move to a player's village, so the only thing you could do was visit his heavily themed RV, which looks like the most overstimulating experience I could possibly imagine. And the last 5 characters we're going to talk about are super special, because these are promotional characters who only appeared in Dobutsu no Mori Plus, meaning they've never existed outside of Japan. First we have Nindori the ostrich. Nindori was a character introduced to promote the gaming magazine Nintendo Dream, and he was actually created as part of a contest run by the magazine. Readers were invited to design a mascot for the magazine who would also appear in the Animal Crossing game, and this little orange and black ostrich proved to be the winning design. He was actually introduced to readers via this really cute recurring comic strip which ran across multiple volumes of the magazine until issue 102. In this issue, readers were gifted Nindori's e-reader card, which is the only way you could get Nindori to visit your village. There's also apparently lore that Nindori has 3 siblings, who are apparently mentioned in the comics, but they don't appear in the game. We then have this strange little character called Shinabiru. This is a duck villager for whom there is startlingly little information on, but we do know he was designed by Japanese manga artist Takayaki Mizushina, and he actually based the design for the character on himself. Like I say, there is so little information on this character, but I did find one blog post saying that he was created as a collaboration with the Good Electronics company, but I couldn't find literally anything else about this. Like, I mean, I actually couldn't even find anything to do with the company Good Electronics. When I Google it, it just comes up with, like, electronic companies that are good. But it seems that, like Nidori, the only way to get him in your town was via an e-reader card, given out with a magazine. But this time, the magazine was Weekly Famitsu. And we have a couple more characters that were only available with e-reader cards given out in a very specific way. And the first one is this bird called Shokichi. This villager's card was bundled with a collection of Animal Crossing figurines distributed by Takara Co. There were a ton of these character sets made and they are all so cute, but I believe the one Shokichi was given out with was F50, the set with Sable, Wolfgang and the T-Rex tail. This collection actually included two more sets, F48 and F49, which included cards for two more very iconic e-reader characters exclusive to Japan that never made it into the Western releases, Bao and Meow. These two are an adorable pair of cat and dog characters, unique for the fact that they have LCD screens for their faces. And this is because these characters were designed as a tie-in for the Baolingual and Meowlingual pet translation devices, also created by Takara Co. These were little handheld devices for which the gimmick was that they could translate the emotions of your dog or cat based on their vocalizations. Although it does state that this device was meant to be for entertainment purposes only, so it's not exactly a piece of groundbreaking science, is essentially a glorified toy. Although it was actually hailed as this kind of really incredible piece of technology when it came out. I couldn't really understand this in my research, but it won some kind of like peace prize for like animal communications. I don't know. All this to say, I think Bao and Meow are very, very cute, potentially two of my favourite Animal Crossing characters, and I think we can all mourn the fact that they never got a Western release. And that is all the lost and forgotten Animal Crossing content we have to cover today. Like I said, I am 100% confident that this is not every single lost and forgotten element of the Animal Crossing games. I'm sure if you go digging around on the internet, there are so many more things. These are just a few that I thought were interesting and that I wanted to share. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I really enjoyed making it, and thank you for all the support on my previous uploads. It is so lovely reading all your comments. I'm going to be doing a little bit of experimentation with the types of videos that I do. They're all still going to be video essays, but I'm going to try a few different topics and see what does well and what I like doing and everything. So I hope you'll stick around for them. I'm really excited. And yeah, I will see you again soon. Bye!